Amari Hale stood frozen in the hallway, his locker defaced with a slur, his scholarship already revoked. Just hours ago, he'd been the pride of Windcrest Academy, the black genius who solved the impossible equation. Now the principal was calling it a violation of integrity, and his teacher smiling. But as Amari opened the sealed envelope hidden in his backpack, everything they feared was about to be exposed. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Windcrest Academy was a picture-perfect sanctuary of privilege. Ivy-covered brick walls, polished marble hallways, and manicured lawns so pristine they looked painted on. Located in a wealthy suburb outside Raleigh, North Carolina, it boasted a student body filled with the sons and daughters of CEOs, state senators, and tech entrepreneurs. Scholarships were rare, black students rarer. Amari Hale stood out the moment he entered those gates. Not for anything loud or flashy, but for how quietly he carried himself. 16, tall for his age, with skin the color of chestnut and eyes that stayed fixed on the floor when teachers spoke. He was one of just 6 black students in the entire junior class, and the only one in AP Calculus 2. His mother, Simone, worked 2 nursing jobs. His father, Calvin, swept floors at a downtown hospital and never missed a shift. Their sacrifices bought Amari this opportunity. It wasn't just a school to them, it was a ticket out. But inside Windcrest, tickets came with terms. Every hallway was lined with pictures of smiling graduates, their Ivy League acceptance letters framed in glass. But none of those faces looked like Amari's. Most days he kept his hoodie up even when it wasn't cold, headphones in, eyes down. He learned early that at Windcrest, invisibility was safer than attention. That illusion shattered the morning Mr. Calloway decided to make an example of him. Mr. Calloway was the kind of teacher who made students sit up straighter the second he entered the room. Late 40s, silver-rimmed glasses, and a voice that cut like chalk on a board. He taught calculus like it was war. Only the toughest deserved to survive. He loved 2 things: rigor and the illusion of fairness. He was known for pop quizzes so brutal students left crying. He once called out a Vietnamese student in front of the entire class to prove Asian stereotypes, then claimed it was a joke. He never joked with Amari. That Tuesday morning, the air felt thicker than usual. The bell rang. Students shuffled in, half awake, clutching coffees and calculators. Amari took his usual spot, back row, far left. From there, he could think without the weight of eyes. Mr. Calloway didn't speak as he walked in. Instead, he turned to the board, and in aggressive, deliberate strokes, began writing. Symbols, limits, integrals, stacked on top of one another. Derivatives twisting around exponentials. The equations stretched across the entire whiteboard. Most students blinked at it, already defeated. Calloway capped the marker and turned, scanning the room with a grin too sly to trust. Today, he said, we're going to have a little challenge. He tapped the board. This is a modified version of a proof that stumped grad students at MIT last year. Don't worry, you're not expected to solve it. In fact, I'd be shocked if anyone here even gets close. He let that hang in the air. Then his eyes found Amari. But maybe we'll see some hidden genius today. The sarcasm dripped like venom. A few students snickered. Emily Rhodes, daughter of a real estate mogul, whispered something to the lacrosse captain beside her. Laughter followed. Amari felt their eyes crawl over him. He knew what this was. A setup. A silent message in front of the whole class. Stay in your lane. But instead of shrinking, something inside him clicked. He looked at the board. Not at Calloway. Not at the students. Just the math. To most, it was gibberish. But to Amari, it was a code. A rhythm. Something about the arrangement looked familiar. Not the content, but the structure. It reminded him of a problem he saw once in a dusty old college textbook his father brought home from a donation bin. A pattern began to emerge in his mind. He raised his hand. The room tensed. Calloway raised an eyebrow. Yes, Mr. Hale. May I try? The silence that followed was not permission. It was disbelief. Calloway smirked. By all means. Amari stood slowly, hands steady, heart pounding. He walked to the board, picked up the marker, and began. Step 1. Break the function into smaller parts. Step 2. Rewrite the outer layer in terms of simplified expressions. Step 3. Find the limits. A substitution here, a reversal there. The classroom noise faded. The snickers stopped. What began as amusement turned to confusion, then to awe. Amari moved like he wasn't thinking, like he was remembering. Each line flowed into the next. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. Even Calloway leaned forward. By the time Amari reached the bottom right corner of the board, he had written over 24 clean, connected steps. He paused, checked the symmetry of the logic, and finally wrote the final answer in bold, definitive strokes. He capped the marker, turned around. No one said a word. The clock ticked. For the first time in a long while, Amari Hale stood in a room full of silence and power. Calloway's face was unreadable. His jaw clenched so tightly, the veins showed in his temple. Then, a single voice broke the quiet. "Wait, is that actually right?" The girl in the front row, Savannah, usually the loudest critic of Amari's silence, sounded stunned. Calloway stepped forward, read the board once, then again, and again. Each time, his expression tightened. Amari didn't need his validation. He knew what he wrote. But he also knew what was coming. Not applause, not praise, a different kind of silence. The kind before a storm. The room goes silent as Amari reaches the final step, and the answer appears correct. The silence lingered like fog in the classroom, thick and smothering. Amari could feel every pair of eyes pinned to his back, still facing the board, the marker loose in his hand. He had done it, solved the equation, solved their impossible problem. But instead of applause, instead of awe or acknowledgement, there was only stillness. Mr. Calloway's voice cut through the tension, low but sharp enough to sting. "Where did you see the solution?" Amari turned slowly. The smile he'd almost let himself feel vanished. "Excuse me?" Mr. Calloway stepped forward, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. "That proof. The structure. It's advanced. Beyond what we've covered. So I'll ask again, where did you see it?" A ripple moved through the class, first confusion, then the thin smile of vindication on a few faces. Emily Rhodes leaned back in her seat, nudging the boy beside her. He muttered something under his breath. Laughter followed. Amari didn't need to hear it to know what they were saying. "I didn't see it anywhere," Amari replied, his voice calm but tight. "I figured it out." Calloway tilted his head, eyes scanning the board as if hunting for a flaw he knew wasn't there. "Do you even understand what you wrote?" The question landed like a slap. Amari blinked. "Yes. Every step." Calloway walked closer, his tone now theatrical, calculated for the room. "Really? Then maybe explain the reasoning behind step 7. The trigonometric substitution you used." Amari paused only a moment, then broke it down. Clean, concise, confident. The logic flowed naturally. It made sense. Calloway didn't respond. He just looked at him for a long, hard second before turning to the class. "Well," he muttered, "either Mr. Hale is secretly auditing grad-level math courses, or someone helped him." The temperature in the room dropped. Some students stared at Amari with surprise, others with skepticism. A few wore smirks that said, "I knew it." No one defended him. "Did someone give this to you?" Calloway continued, louder now. "You can tell me. I'm sure your intentions were innocent." Amari's chest tightened. "No one gave me anything." "You sure?" The tone was faux kindness now. "A performance. Because plagiarism has consequences. Serious ones." Amari looked around. No support. No solidarity. Just a quiet, suffocating sea of judgment. "I didn't cheat," he said, firmer this time. "You said it was a challenge. I solved it." Calloway smiled. The kind that didn't reach the eyes. "Right." And then just like that, class resumed. He turned his back and began a new lecture as if nothing had happened. Amari stood there holding the marker, stunned. He returned to his seat, but nothing was the same. Whispers began immediately. Behind hands, beneath breaths. "Bet he copied it. There's no way he did that on his own. Maybe someone fed it to him through his AirPods." Even his friend Jalen, who usually gave him a nod of encouragement, kept his eyes on his notebook. When the bell rang, Amari moved quickly, gathering his things. But just as he stepped into the hallway, a voice called after him. "Mr. Hale." He turned. Principal Travers stood outside the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Tall, poised, with a sharp suit and a sharper tongue, she was the kind of administrator who smiled through discomfort. "Walk with me." They moved through the corridor in silence until they reached her office. She gestured to a chair. Amari sat, backpack still on. "I heard about the little episode in calculus today. He stayed silent. Mr. Calloway seems concerned. Says the solution you gave was advanced, even for his standards. That's quite the impression. Amari shrugged. It was math. She folded her hands. It was also unexpected. He looked at her, searching for meaning behind her words. I understand you're gifted. You've shown promise before. But sometimes, especially here, it's important to remember the room you're in. What does that mean? She smiled faintly. It means staying humble, letting the work speak without forcing attention. I wasn't trying to force anything, he said. He put it on the board. Yes, and now it's being handled, she replied gently. I just wanted to advise you, keep your head down. Let this pass. Eyes on graduation, not headlines. He stood without waiting for dismissal. Thank you, Principal Trevors. The ride home was quiet. He didn't tell his parents. But his mother noticed the shift the moment he walked in. What happened? Nothing. Boy, don't lie to me, I know that look. He sat at the kitchen table while she stirred the pot on the stove. The smell of simmering rice filled the air, but it did nothing to settle his stomach. I solved a problem in class. Something hard. Real hard. The teacher didn't believe me. Her stirring slowed. Said I cheated. She turned and looked at him. Of course he did. Amari's eyes lifted. What? She sat across from him, wiped her hands on her apron. Baby, you're not supposed to shine in places like that. You think they give you that scholarship for your mind? No. They give it to say they did, so they can tell themselves they're not racist while hoping you don't outperform their kids. He sat in silence, her words landing heavier than any accusation at school. You're black and brilliant. That scares them more than anything. But I didn't do anything wrong, he whispered. She touched his hand. I know, but doing right don't protect you, not in their world. You've got to be twice as good, and still expect half the credit. That night, Amari lay awake, replaying every moment. The equation, the eyes, the tone of Mr. Calloway's voice, the smile that said, you went too far. He almost didn't want to go back the next day. But staying home felt like surrender. The next morning, he walked into school with his hoodie up, earbuds in, eyes low. He passed the other students quickly, ignoring their stares. When he reached his locker, something bright yellow caught his eye. A slip of paper was taped across the handle. You are under investigation for academic dishonesty. See the dean's office immediately. The next day, Amari finds a disciplinary note on his locker. He's being investigated for academic dishonesty. The yellow slip on Amari's locker didn't just announce an investigation, it flipped a switch. Within hours, the school had erupted in whispers, fueled by speculation, envy, and long-suppressed bias. It started with a whisper between two students in the hallway.
You heard he's being investigated? They say he stole the answer.
He probably hacked something. I mean, come on, that was grad-level math. By third period, it had evolved into something darker. Screenshots of the equation Amari had solved began circulating with captions like, MIT, more like Ctrl-CC. In a matter of hours, Amari's brilliance had been reframed as deceit, and worse, audacity. In a school that prided itself on intellectual merit, it didn't matter that he'd done the work. What mattered was who had done it. A rumor gained traction. Amari had hacked into the school server and found an answer key from an archived MIT exam. Another theory insisted he'd gotten outside help. Someone probably fed him the solution through his earbuds. It didn't matter how absurd the claims were. They filled a need. The idea of a black student outperforming their best and brightest was too disruptive to accept at face value. By lunchtime, the damage was spreading like a virus. The Windcrest Math Club, a competitive invitation-only circle of top-performing students, sent Amari a polite but cold email. Due to current academic integrity concerns, we've decided it's best to pause your involvement in our club pending resolution. This is not a reflection of your character, but rather a temporary measure for the integrity of the group. He sat at the far end of the cafeteria, the email glowing on his cracked phone screen, while trays clattered and conversations buzzed all around him. No one sat with him that day, even Jalen. Jalen Price had been his closest friend since freshman year. They'd bonded over late-night video games, AP exams, and shared detentions. But now, Jalen avoided his gaze entirely. When Amari caught up to him in the hallway and asked what was going on, Jalen hesitated before saying quietly, "My dad's on the PTA. He told me I should lay low. Just for now." Amari swallowed the response like broken glass. "So you believe them too?" I didn't say that, this school is political, man. You know that. No, I didn't, Amari said, stepping back. But I guess now I do. The final blow of the day came with the buzz of his phone during biology class. A video. He clicked it, already knowing he'd regret it. It was grainy, filmed on someone's phone during the calculus class. The caption read, "When you solve a problem no one asked you to." The video cut to a still image of Amari at the board, then zoomed in on his face with a slow, mocking pan as dramatic music played beneath it. The final frame was a black screen with bold white letters, "Copy-paste King." Amari sat frozen as the students around him chuckled. One of them even had the audacity to glance back at him with a smirk. By the time school let out, the video had over 2,000 views, mostly from Windcrest students. But it was spreading fast. At home, Amari tried to ignore it. He didn't talk much during dinner. He picked at his food. His mom noticed, but she didn't press. Later that night, while scrolling through the trending tab on his school's unofficial Reddit page, he saw something that made his stomach drop. A meme. His face photoshopped onto a janitor's body, holding a mop. The caption read, "When you think cleaning equations is the same as solving them." The image was posted by an anonymous account, with the handle "A Clean It Up Fail." He closed his laptop and buried his head in his hands. For the next few days, he avoided eye contact in the halls. He stopped raising his hand in class. Teachers offered awkward smiles, but none of them addressed what was happening. Mr. Calloway, of course, never mentioned the equation again, but his silence spoke volumes. The damage wasn't loud. It was precise, targeted, institutional. At Windcrest, silence wasn't neutral. It was strategic. The more Amari withdrew, the easier it became for the narrative to evolve. He stopped going to math club meetings altogether. He sat alone at lunch. The only people who spoke to him were teachers trying to check in, and even then, their eyes scanned him like they were auditing something beneath the surface. He began to doubt himself. Maybe he had remembered something without realizing it. Maybe he'd seen a similar problem, and just copied the form subconsciously. Maybe. But every time that thought crept in, another voice fought back. His mother's voice. "You know what you know. Don't let them shake that." Still, the weight of isolation pressed harder with each passing day. One evening, Amari opened his calculus textbook, intending to distract himself with formulas, but instead of focusing, he just stared at the pages, blurred symbols and smudged margins. For the first time since the board incident, he couldn't see the patterns. The math, the thing that always calmed him, felt like static now. Was he losing it? The line between reality and the story being told about him had begun to blur. His mind, usually razor-sharp, felt muddled with doubt, fear, anger. And then just when the fog felt thickest, his phone buzzed. He ignored it at first. Another buzz. This time an email. Subject line, "I know what you did was real." No sender name. No signature. Just a plain message that pierced through the noise, like a lightning bolt. He stared at it, hands trembling slightly, unsure if this was another trick, or the first thread of truth. Late at night, a mysterious email arrives. Subject line, "I know what you did was real." The email sat in Amari's inbox for hours before he summoned the nerve to open it. Something about it felt too precise, too personal, to be a prank. The subject line, "I know what you did was real," echoed in his mind long after midnight. He clicked it just before dawn, half expecting a trap, a joke, another bite from the growing swarm that stalked him. But what he found was neither hostile nor mocking. It was precise, respectful, and oddly quiet. "Mr. Hale, I watched the video. The proof you wrote, most people wouldn't recognize the structure. But I did, because I once solved something just like it. Back when I was your age. I was punished for it too. If you're willing to talk, I'm willing to listen. I live in Durham, retired now. But the numbers, they never leave us. Do they?" Reuben Sykes. There was no contact number, just an address, a name. Amari read it over 3 times before copying it into a notebook. The next day after school, he lied to his mother and took a bus. 2 transfers, 1 hour, and a long walk through a quiet neighborhood, lined with peeling porches and worn-down pride. It looked nothing like Windcrest. Dr. Reuben Sykes lived in a modest 1-story home, paint fading on the shutters, wind chimes tapping gently in the breeze. Amari hesitated before knocking. The door opened before he could. Dr. Sykes was tall, wiry, with silver hair cropped close and eyes that looked like they'd stopped blinking decades ago. He wore a faded Howard University sweatshirt and held a cup of tea in one hand. "You're early," he said. "That's good. Punctuality is undervalued in youth." Amari stood awkwardly. "You're Dr. Sykes." "I was. Now I'm just Reuben. Come in." The house smelled like old books and lavender. Mathematical journals lined every shelf, alongside dusty plaques and fading photos of young black men in graduation robes. They sat at a cluttered table, yellowed paper stacked beside chessboards and open notebooks. Reuben didn't waste time. "You're smart," he said. "That scares them." Amari said nothing. "Smarter than you know, probably. But not smarter than history." There was something sharp in his voice, like a blade dulled by use, but still dangerous. "I watched that video 5 times, Reuben continued. "You didn't copy anything. That solution came from inside your bones. You've got number sense. Pattern recognition. A gift." He leaned forward. "I know because I had it too." Amari finally spoke. "What happened to you?" Reuben's eyes clouded. "Harvard, 1984. I proved a theorem that contradicted the published work of a tenured white professor. I was 21. They said it was flawed, even though it wasn't. Took my paper, buried it. Said I'd plagiarized a Russian mathematician I'd never heard of. Next semester, my scholarship vanished." Amari leaned in. "You got expelled?" "No. Worse. I stayed. Graduated. But they made sure I'd never publish again. Every door closed. I taught high school for 30 years. That was my punishment." The room was quiet for a moment. Amari absorbed every word like medicine, bitter but necessary. "I thought it was just me," he said. "It's never just you," Reuben replied. "It's just your turn." For the next hour, Reuben quizzed him. Complex proofs, abstract logic puzzles, nothing like Windcrest's curriculum. Amari rose to each challenge, not just solving them but feeling the math in his gut again, like breathing. Reuben slid a fresh notebook across the table. "I want you to fill this," he said. "Every day, one new problem. Not from your textbook. From here." He tapped Amari's chest. "You're a builder. Build something they can't tear down." Amari left that night with the notebook, a dozen new theorems to research, and the first real sense of purpose he'd felt in weeks. They met every few days in secret, sometimes in the library, sometimes at Reuben's house. Always away from Windcrest's eyes. It was a hidden education, the kind no elite school would offer. Not just equations, but survival. Reuben taught him how to write proofs that couldn't be dismissed, how to source obscure research before someone claimed he'd stolen it, how to document every thought, every date, every draft. And he taught him the most important truth of all. "They fear what they can't control," he said one rainy afternoon, "in what they can't explain. You, Amari, you're both." The sessions became therapy, a rebellion, a sanctuary built from numbers. Amari started smiling again. Not big, not publicly, but in the quiet when equations bent to his will, when he saw something others missed, when the chaos made sense. He didn't care about Windcrest anymore. Not really. He had found something deeper than their approval. He had found a mind like his own. But not everyone stayed blind to the shift in him. Mr. Calloway noticed. He saw the way Amari's confidence returned, the new books under his arm, the calculations he scribbled on lunch napkins. The whispers had started to fade, but Calloway wasn't finished. Late one evening, after school had emptied out and most teachers had gone home, Calloway lingered in his classroom, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through his computer. His fingers hovered over the administrative portal. Faculty had access to all school-issued email accounts, including student correspondence. With a few keystrokes, he opened Amari's inbox. It wasn't technically illegal. It wasn't even against policy. Not exactly. Calloway scanned the messages, his eyes narrowing as he found them. Threads from a Reuben S. mentorship, advanced topics, hints of rebellion. He didn't read all of them. He didn't need to. He hit forward. Recipient, head of the Academic Integrity Board, CC Principal Travers. Subject, urgent. Outside academic assistance, unauthorized mentorship. Mr. Calloway secretly accesses Amari's emails and forwards them to the school board. It began with a cold knock on the classroom door. Midway through third period, Amari looked up from his notes to find an assistant from the front office standing in the doorway, holding a sealed envelope in her hand. "Mr. Hale, you're needed at the principal's office." The classroom fell quiet. All eyes turned. Mr. Calloway didn't even feign surprise. Amari stood slowly, unsure whether to feel dread or déjà vu. The walk down the hallway felt longer this time. Every step sounded like a countdown. Inside Principal Trevor's office, the curtains were drawn. The lights dimmed. 3 other people waited. The Dean of Academics, the school's legal compliance officer, and a stone-faced secretary tapping notes on a tablet. Principal Travers sat at the head of the table. "Have a seat, Amari."
No smile, no warmth, no pretense of support.
As soon as he sat, she folded her hands over a thick file and began. After reviewing recent correspondence and academic submissions, Windcrest Academy has found sufficient grounds to open a formal investigation into potential violations of the academic integrity policy. Amari blinked. "What violations?" "The work you submitted in your advanced calculus class," she continued, coupled with a series of private exchanges with an external individual, one Dr. Reuben Sykes, suggests you may have received unapproved assistance on coursework. "He's not a tutor," Omari said, sitting up straighter. "He's a retired mathematician. I met him after the incident with Mr. Calloway. He reached out to me." "We're aware," she said coolly. "Regardless of the timeline, the nature of your communication raises concern. As you know, Windcrest's honor code forbids external academic influence on classroom assignments. But that equation wasn't even an assignment. He wrote it on the board as a challenge." "Nevertheless," the dean interrupted, "any work done with input from an external source, whether solicited or not, is subject to scrutiny." Amari's hands tightened into fists beneath the desk. "I didn't cheat," he said quietly. Travers didn't respond. She simply opened the file and slid a printed email across the desk. His own words stared back at him. One line bolded in yellow. "I never knew math could feel like this until you gave me that problem on iterative integrals." "Context," Travers said, "matters." The meeting ended without a verdict, only a promise. The academic review board would decide next week. But the verdict was already being written online. By that evening, a local news outlet had caught wind of the story. "Gifted black student under investigation for cheating at elite prep school." The headline tried to appear neutral, but the subtext wasn't. The article described Amari's equation, quoted the school's press release about maintaining standards, and ended with an anonymous source from within the faculty. "We want all our students to succeed, but rules are rules." The comments told a different story. "Probably got in through a diversity scholarship anyway. This is why merit should matter more than melanin. Just another affirmative action mistake. Thinks he's Einstein, but he's just good at copying." Within 24 hours, the story had spread beyond Windcrest. Amari's face appeared on a regional talk show, a blurred classroom, still from the infamous viral video. A guest panelist, a white former teacher, insisted, "The real tragedy is when schools lower standards to look inclusive, then punish themselves when kids can't meet the bar." His mother, Simone, nearly threw her phone when she saw it. That night she marched into the principal's office without an appointment, flanked by Amari and his father. Simone's voice trembled with anger and exhaustion. "My son did nothing wrong. He didn't steal anything. He solved a problem you all said couldn't be solved, and because it didn't come from the mouth you expected, now it's called cheating." Principal Travers tried to hold her ground. "Mrs. Hale, I understand your frustration." "No," Simone snapped. "You understand getting sued. I promise you that. Because what's happening here? This isn't about a policy violation. It's about perception. You don't like the way it looks. A black boy outthinking your tenured faculty. We are treating this as a matter of academic integrity, not race." "Don't lie to me," Simone said. "You all couldn't wait to cut him down. He made y'all uncomfortable the second he proved you wrong." She turned to the board members in the room. "Look me in the eye and tell me this would be happening if his name were Preston or Logan." No one did. After they left, Dr. Sykes offered to testify on Amari's behalf. He drafted a letter, listing credentials, research, and a timeline to prove he had no contact with Amari before the equation was solved, but the school refused to accept him as a witness. "Not relevant," they said. "Too close to the subject." The more they tried to bury the truth, the louder it became outside the school walls. A grassroots petition emerged, mostly from alumni and progressive teachers, urging Windcrest to drop the charges. But it was too late. 3 days later, Amari was pulled from class and handed a final letter. Suspension pending full investigation. His access to the school portal was revoked. His student ID disabled. His locker cleaned out by security. The worst came in a single line of email from the MIT liaison. who had once championed his early application. Due to the ongoing review of your academic record, we are pausing your candidacy for the 2025 MIT Scholar Initiative until the matter is resolved. Amari didn't cry, not then. He just stood in the parking lot outside Windcrest holding the letter, while his mother's car rolled slowly toward him. Inside, his world was collapsing. Outside, a storm was brewing. Amari is suspended pending investigation and loses his recommendation for MIT. The announcement of Amari's suspension landed like a thunderclap across Windcrest's pristine campus. It wasn't just news, it was a rupture. The school had always operated on quiet superiority, its surface polished, its flaws hidden under honor codes and diversity brochures. But now the cracks were visible and loud. The morning after the news broke, a wave of students walked into campus, not wearing Windcrest colors, but all black clothing. Many had small white buttons pinned to their shirts with a single equation, the one Amari had solved. At the center of it all was the Black Student Union, small, often overlooked, but now galvanized. They had printed flyers overnight, handed out petitions during morning drop-off, and posted banners in the common spaces. This isn't about math. This is about race. Their petition demanded a transparent investigation, reinstatement of Amari's scholarship, and an apology from both Mr. Calloway and Principal Trevors. Hundreds of students signed within the first 24 hours. But the resistance was swift and surgical. By midday, a counter-petition had been launched by a group of concerned parents and PTA members under the name Academic Integrity First. Their statement read, "We support students of all backgrounds, but we also believe that excellence must be earned through honest effort, not shortcuts. Our children should never feel that hard work is replaced by headlines." It was the kind of language that sounded neutral, but was soaked in dog whistles. Honest effort. Our children. Words designed to reassure white parents, while quietly framing Amari as a threat. Emails flooded the school's inbox. Some supportive, many not. This is why schools shouldn't lower their standards just to meet a quota. Our kids are being overshadowed by manufactured genius. Calloway was right to question it. No way a kid like that solves something MIT students can't. The divide wasn't just on paper. It began showing up in lockers, in whispers, in casual cruelty. The next day, Amari's locker, previously cleaned out by security, was spray-painted in bold red letters. "Stay in your place." The message stayed up for hours before it was scrubbed. No statement was released. No security footage reviewed. Just silence. His name was everywhere now. On protest signs, Instagram stories, school gossip threads. Half the students called him a hero. The other half, a fraud. Some of the teachers stayed neutral. Others didn't even bother. Mr. Calloway's next calculus class was a masterclass in masked hostility. He stood at the board with the same tight smile, speaking to the class like nothing had happened. But near the end of the period, he paused mid-equation and looked out at the room. "Now I know some of you might think you've found shortcuts," he said, eyes scanning the rows until they landed on Amari's empty seat. "But mathematics, real mathematics, isn't about tricks. It's about discipline. It's about knowing your limits." He let the words settle. "Some people," he added, "just aren't cut out for this." A few students laughed softly. Others shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke out. Back at home, Amari barely left his room. His once safe haven of notebooks and quiet had turned into a place of questions and numbness. He watched the protests online but didn't go. He saw his face on signs, sometimes painted like a saint, sometimes crossed out in red. He didn't recognize either version of himself. His mother kept trying to lift the weight from his shoulders, but her own face had begun to show the cracks. Lines deepened, eyes always tired, phone glued to her hand, trying to catch rumors before they reached her son. One night, Amari sat with his father in the living room. The TV was off, no sound, just the two of them, and the weight of what wasn't being said. "I ever tell you," Calvin began quietly, "about the time I got written up at work for mishandling a mop?" Amari looked at him. "I was cleaning the cancer ward. A woman slipped near the vending machine. I helped her up. She was fine, but next day they wrote me up. Said I left water on the floor. Said my negligence could have cost them a lawsuit. What'd you do?" "I kept working, because I had you to feed." He paused. "But I didn't forget, and neither should you." Amari nodded slowly. "They don't want us here." "No," his father said. "They want us here, as long as we stay small. The next morning was unusually quiet. Simone left early for her hospital shift, and Calvin stayed behind to patch a leak in the roof. Amari's little sister, Nia, walked to the mailbox like she always did. But this time she didn't come back right away. Calvin found her standing frozen on the front lawn, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "Daddy," she whispered. He followed her gaze. Hanging from the old oak tree near the curb, swaying slightly in the breeze, was a noose. A thick rope, knotted tight, deliberate, displayed. The mailbox door was open. Inside, a single piece of paper folded in half. On it, in red ink, "Excellence has a price." Omari's younger sister finds a noose in their front yard. The noose didn't make the morning announcements. No sirens, no lockdowns, no police tape strung across the Hale family's lawn. Just whispers behind curtains, and a short police visit that lasted less than 10 minutes. 2 white officers arrived after an hour, sunglasses still on, clipboards out. They asked a few procedural questions, while standing comfortably away from the tree, as if afraid the rope might implicate them by proximity. Officer Keating, the taller one, scribbled something lazily into his notepad. "Could be kids. Halloween prank. Seen stuff like this around here before." Simone Hale, just off a double shift, still in scrubs, stepped forward. "You think someone left a noose as a prank? In our yard? After my son got suspended for being too smart?" Officer Keating didn't flinch. "We'll log it. Let the precinct know. If we get anything on the neighborhood cameras, we'll follow up." But they didn't take the rope. They left it to dangle there. An unwanted ornament. Calvin took it down himself with trembling hands, while Nia watched from the porch, clutching a stuffed bear like it could protect her from the world. At Windcrest Academy, the administration moved even slower. 3 days passed. No email, no assembly. Finally, on the 4th day, Principal Trevor sent out a carefully worded memo to staff and students. An incident occurred near a student's home involving a troubling symbol. While the police have not determined whether it was racially motivated, we remain committed to fostering a respectful environment. All students are encouraged to participate in next week's scheduled sensitivity workshops. No mention of Amari by name. No mention of racism. Just an incident. To many, that silence spoke louder than any slur. Inside the school, the message was clear. Say nothing, risk nothing. White students, emboldened by the administration's refusal to confront the truth, began testing the boundaries. One day in the cafeteria, a group of juniors walked past Amari's empty seat and muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Should have left the rope up. Might have scared him back into line." Laughter. No consequences. Another day, someone slipped a fake noose made of shoelaces into Amari's old locker. The dean called it an unfortunate coincidence. The halls, once filled with quiet calculation and whispered ambition, now felt like a hunting ground. Amari returned to school once a week for mandated check-ins with the review board. Each time, he walked past his former classmates like a ghost in a place he used to belong. His father, Calvin, still swept those same hallways every morning before sunrise. But after the noose incident, he walked with eyes down and headphones in. Stillness had always been his armor, but even stillness couldn't save him forever. One afternoon, while mopping the math wing, Calvin saw Mr. Calloway step out of his classroom, papers in hand. Their eyes met. For the first time in weeks, Calvin pulled his earbuds out. "I don't think we've been formally introduced," he said. Calloway gave a stiff nod. "I know who you are." Calvin leaned on the mop handle. "I've been working this school 8 years. Never had a problem with a teacher before. But I gotta ask, what exactly did my boy do to you?" Calloway didn't look surprised. He simply tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "Excuse me?" "My son," Calvin repeated. "What did he do that made you afraid enough to ruin him?" Calloway's smile was faint, thin. "He embarrassed me, publicly, and I have a classroom to manage." "So you taught him a lesson?" Calvin said. "No," Calloway replied. "I taught the class a lesson." The words settled like dust, and then Calvin turned away. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't push. He simply walked out of the wing and didn't return the next morning. A termination letter arrived 2 days later, citing inappropriate interaction with a faculty member. When Simone confronted the school, demanding to know how a father defending his child warranted being fired, they responded with a line she would never forget. "Staff are expected to maintain professional distance from ongoing disciplinary proceedings." Back home, the house felt heavier. Amari stopped checking emails. He stopped opening textbooks. Even Dr. Sykes' messages piled up unread. The boy who once saw patterns in chaos now only saw noise, until a knock sounded at the door one evening. Reuben Sykes stood on the porch in a long overcoat, holding something tightly under one arm. His eyes, as always, didn't blink much. Amari opened the door, expecting maybe another lecture, but Reuben didn't say anything at first. He simply walked inside, sat at the kitchen table, and slid a sealed envelope across the wood. "What's this?" Amari asked. "A piece of history." Amari opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of yellowing paper. On it, a complex mathematical proof, and at the bottom, written in a neat, familiar hand, dated October. Reuben Sykes, Harvard University. Amari looked up.
This is the same equation.
"Not identical," Reuben said, "but close. That one, my version, never saw publication. It was buried, discredited, but it's the same structure, same foundation." "Why are you showing me this now?" Reuben leaned forward. "Because history isn't repeating itself. It's escalating. You weren't supposed to solve that problem. You weren't supposed to exist in their imagination of what genius looks like, just like I wasn't." He paused. "But you did, and so did I, and now you're going to finish what they wouldn't let me start." Amari stared down at the faded ink, hands trembling. It wasn't just his story anymore. Dr. Sykes shows Amari a sealed envelope. Inside is a solution to the same equation, dated 1978. Amari sat in stunned silence, the yellowing paper spread across the kitchen table like an unearthed artifact. His fingers traced the symbols, some familiar, others archaic, but all resonating with a strange familiarity. Dr. Sykes watched quietly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with a guarded intensity. "You solved this?" Amari asked, barely above a whisper. Reuben nodded once. "In 1978, Harvard, graduate seminar on multivariable calculus. We were working through a variant of what your teacher posted, though the structure was different, deeper, more layered." Amari's brows furrowed. "It's almost the same logic." "Exactly the same," Reuben said. "I submitted it as part of a larger research paper for review. My proof invalidated a published paper by one of the department chairs, a man named Dr. Whitaker. He made his name on that paper." "What happened?" Reuben smiled bitterly. "First, he thanked me, said it was brilliant. Then 2 weeks later, my research assistantship was pulled. My paper was returned with a note that said it lacked originality and resembled a Soviet mathematician's unpublished work. I hadn't even heard of the man." Amari leaned back stunned. "They said you plagiarized."
They didn't need to prove it.
"Just suggest it loud enough," Reuben replied. "I appealed, got nowhere. I became the problem, the one they couldn't explain. So they made me disappear." Amari stared at the equations again. Each line felt like a ghost, a piece of history never meant to be seen again. "Why didn't you fight harder?" he asked. Reuben let out a tired breath. "I tried, but when the people in power own the narrative, truth becomes optional." The words hit Amari like cold water. For weeks he'd been trying to understand the tidal wave that had hit him, why a solved problem could trigger so much hostility, why rightness didn't protect him. Now it all clicked. He wasn't the first, just the latest. He picked up a pencil and began writing next to Reuben's original proof. "What are you doing?" Reuben asked. "I'm not letting this die again." Line by line, Amari began refining the equation. He replaced old notations with modern ones, streamlined the steps, added logic Reuben hadn't had access to in the 70s. It wasn't a correction. It was an evolution. Reuben watched, stunned. "You're not just replicating it, you're improving it." Amari didn't look up. "We'll make it undeniable." For the next 2 days, Amari barely slept. He filled 2 full notebooks, tracing pathways through the problem like a surgeon inside a living mind. He didn't just solve the proof. He broke it apart, rebuilt it, made it sing. By the end, he had created what even Reuben admitted was a more elegant solution than I ever imagined. "This," Amari said, holding up the final draft, "is ours. But I want people to see it. All of it." They scanned the pages, formatted the notes, created a document that blended Reuben's original 1978 theorem with Amari's modern expansion. Then, with shaking hands, Amari sent it to 3 major academic publications. He expected a flood of responses. He got silence. One email came back automated. "Thank you for your submission. Our editorial review board is currently at capacity." Another simply said, "Not the right fit." A third didn't respond at all. "They're ignoring it." Amari said, voice raw. They don't understand it, Reuben replied. Or worse, they do, and they know what it means. But the math is sound. It's beautiful. Why wouldn't they care? Reuben gave him a long look. Because it's not sensational. It's not clickbait. And it doesn't come from someone they've decided matters. The words sat heavy in the room. Amari had done everything right. He had built the perfect proof, followed every protocol, played by their rules, and still it wasn't enough. But something else stirred beneath his frustration. Resolve. Then we go outside their system, he said. We tell the story our way. He created a dedicated site, equationunburied.com, with a clean interface and no fluff. Just the proof, the history, the connection between Reuben and himself. He uploaded the paper, included timelines, screenshots, context, no drama, just truth. Still, the page got a trickle of views. Nothing viral. Then, late one night, just as Amari was about to log off, his inbox chimed. The sender wasn't a professor. Not an editor. Not a school. It was a journalist. Subject line: I believe you. I want to tell your story. A rogue journalist contacts Amari, saying, I believe you. I want to tell your story. The notice came folded in half and slid under the Hale family's door in a plain, unmarked envelope. No seal, no email, just ink on paper, an old-world gesture masking a very modern attempt at control. The Windcrest Academic Review Board will hold a formal integrity hearing for student Amari Hale on Wednesday 9/0. The location: the school library, repurposed for privacy. Amari stared at the paper, the words blurring as his mother reread it aloud. Simone's voice was calm, but her fingers trembled slightly as she held the page. They couldn't even email, she muttered. Like cowards slipping notes in the night. Amari didn't speak. He sat at the kitchen table, a pencil in one hand, a folded notebook in the other, his finished proof, annotated and refined, the work he had poured himself into. They're going to try to erase you, Simone added. Quieter now. Just like they did him. She didn't say Reuben's name. She didn't have to. By the time they arrived that morning, the library didn't feel like a library at all. The shelves had been covered with white paper screens. Tables rearranged. A single overhead light glowed directly above the long panel of faculty seated at the head of the room. 5 members, all hand-picked. At the center sat Dr. Leonard Haskins, who hadn't taught a high school class in decades. Former head of mathematics at Halberton University. A published scholar, and, more importantly, Mr. Calloway's mentor and longtime academic confidant. To Amari, he looked like a man built from legacy. Elbow patch blazer, neatly trimmed beard, an air of quiet authority that didn't need volume. It had history instead. Across from them, Amari sat at a solitary table. To his left, Simone. To his right, Reuben Sykes, technically listed as an observer only. His voice, according to the school, would be permitted at the board's discretion. Principal Trevors opened the session with that too-practiced calm that always felt a few notes above condescending. This hearing is not disciplinary in nature, she said, reading from a printed sheet. It is evaluative. Its goal is to assess whether Windcrest's academic standards were upheld during a specific incident of unverified scholarly performance. No mention of Amari's name. No mention of Mr. Calloway. Just cold bureaucratic fog. Dr. Haskins nodded once. Let us begin with evidence. Mr. Calloway stood as if he'd been waiting his entire career for this moment. Calm, composed. Wearing a navy suit, not his usual shirt and tie combo. He adjusted his glasses and addressed the room like it was another one of his lectures. I assigned a challenge problem, not graded, not required, something complex, meant to provoke thought. Within 10 minutes, Amari Hale stood and completed the solution in front of the class. I was admittedly impressed, but upon further review, I had concern. He picked up a packet of papers. Here is the student's communication with an outside individual. Dr. Reuben Sykes. In it, Mr. Hale acknowledges being inspired by a problem given to him by Dr. Sykes. He let the word inspired hang there like a threat. Dr. Haskins took the papers, flipped through slowly, then looked up. We'll consider these communications as part of the evaluation. Amari raised a hand. May I speak to that point? Haskins hesitated. Trevors nodded. Briefly, Amari stood. The conversation Dr. Calloway is referencing happened after the equation was solved. After the rumors started. Dr. Sykes reached out because he recognized what I had done. We didn't collaborate on that problem. We met because of it. Silence. Amari took a breath, then stepped forward and opened his notebook, revealing the original problem and the final refined proof he had built over the past weeks. I didn't copy this. I didn't steal it. I created it, through hours of work, through instincts I've been sharpening my entire life. What I'm about to walk you through is not a parlor trick. It's math, and it's mine. He launched into the explanation, line by line, breaking the problem down into digestible parts, referencing established theorems, and the history of the solution structure. He cited sources, documented steps, and even showed where his solution evolved beyond Rubin's. For a moment, just a moment, the room actually felt like a classroom again. No judgment, just math. Until Haskins raised a hand. We appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Hale, but this forum has limited time. Please summarize. Amari stopped mid-sentence. Summarize, he asked. You're asking me to condense a multi-layered original proof into sound bites because your attention span has limits. Mr. Hale, Travers interrupted. Remain respectful. No, Amari said. You want me to defend myself, but you've already decided I'm guilty. Why else would you invite my teacher's mentor to serve on the board? That struck a chord. Dr. Haskins shifted in his seat. Travers looked momentarily flustered. Simone put a hand on her son's shoulder. Dr. Sykes finally stood. If this is a review of Amari's work, he said firmly, then let's review it. Properly. I'm a published mathematician. I verified his solution. If this board is making a ruling on intellectual authenticity, then it owes him. Mr. Sykes, Haskins snapped. You were invited to observe, not participate. I'm not here for decorum, Rubin replied. I'm here for truth, and you're twisting it into spectacle. Travers signaled to the guards at the back of the room. Please escort Mr. Sykes out. Simone rose too. You're going to silence him, but let the teacher who started this whole mess stay. The man who never thought my son belonged in his class. The guards stepped forward. Rubin raised his hands in surrender. I expected this, he said. I just hoped Windcrest had grown. As he was led out, he locked eyes with Amari. Finish the problem, he said, even if they never solve themselves. And then he was gone. Amari returned to his seat, heart pounding. Dr. Haskins cleared his throat and shuffled the documents in front of him. Mr. Hale, in the absence of external verification, and given the nature of your communication with Dr. Sykes, we must consider the possibility that your solution was not wholly your own. But you've seen the math. You've seen the structure. Haskins didn't look up. This is not solely about math. It's about process and perception. Amari stared at him, stunned. It's about perception? Yes. Amari stood again, voice lower now, but firmer. Then let me ask you something. He turned toward the entire board. Why are you afraid of my mind? No one moved. Is it because I solved a problem you didn't expect someone like me to touch? Or is it because my solution didn't come from your curriculum, from your faculty, from your system? Still, no one answered. I've been quiet my whole life, kept my head down, did the work, exceeded expectations, and the second I solve something you couldn't explain, something you didn't assign, you treat it like a threat. He took one final breath. I am not your mistake. I'm your mirror. That's why this scares you. He sat down, trembling slightly. Travers called for deliberation. Amari and Simone were asked to wait outside. They sat on a bench in the hallway, silent. The school clock ticked too loudly. Students walked past like the day was ordinary. Somewhere down the hall someone laughed. 20 minutes later, the doors opened. They were called back in. Dr. Haskins spoke, expression blank. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the board finds that Mr. Hale did not sufficiently demonstrate that his work was completed independently and without unapproved assistance. He paused. Our ruling is unanimous. Guilty. The word dropped like lead. Amari stared at the board. Simone's hand tightened around him. Guilty. The board votes unanimously. Guilty. The moment the word guilty left Dr. Haskins' mouth, something inside Amari Hale collapsed. Not violently, not visibly, but slowly, like a building losing its foundation, floor by floor. There was no outburst, no protest, no final plea, just silence. Simone Hale gripped her son's hand, but even she could feel the cold shift. He wasn't present anymore. His body stayed seated, but his spirit had retreated somewhere deeper, darker, far from the people who sat in judgment above him. Windcrest Academy had made its decision. 3 days later, Amari was officially expelled. His record would now include an academic dishonesty violation, his scholarship revoked, his MIT recommendation rescinded. The classroom he once sat in, the desk by the window, was filled by someone else. And Amari Hale disappeared. He didn't just walk away from the school. He walked away from everything. He shut down his social media accounts, deleted his website, blocked calls, stopped answering texts. Not even Jalen could reach him. The protest movement that once rallied behind his name lost momentum without its center. The signs came down. The petitions dried up. The silence was deafening. At home, Simone tried everything. She cooked his favorite meals, brought him old math books, left affirmations on sticky notes around the house. Nothing worked. Amari spent most days in the attic, lights off, phone screen dimmed. He stared at equations, but didn't write. He opened journals, but didn't turn the pages. He was grieving, but it wasn't the school he'd lost. It was belief. Ruben Sykes called, left voicemails. "You still have the gift, Amari. They can't take that. Don't let them bury it." But Amari didn't respond. Ruben grew restless. He knew this pattern. He'd lived it. When you're told you're fraudulent long enough, you start to believe it, even if the numbers say otherwise. Then something unexpected happened. An anonymous user on an underground mathematics forum, the Untouchables, known for dissecting unsolved theorems and celebrating rogue minds, posted a thread titled, "Unpublished Student Proof Challenges Traditional Calculus Framework." It included Amari's full solution. Somehow, someone had archived the proof from his defunct website and uploaded it. No commentary, just math. At first, the post received polite curiosity, then confusion, then fascination. Within 48 hours, the thread had over 500 comments, not from conspiracy theorists or trolls, but from professors, doctoral candidates, and international math competitors. They didn't care about Amari's school record. They only cared about one question. Is this real? The answer, increasingly, was yes. One user, Thatolancer42, posted a full breakdown of Amari's logic. He annotated each step, cited corollaries, and even cross-referenced Ruben Sykes' unpublished, "This isn't plagiarism," the user wrote. "This is evolution. Whoever wrote this thinks in 4D. A week later, the thread was picked up by a math influencer, Xavier Bryce, aka Proof Beats Power, with 600K followers on YouTube and TikTok. Known for making abstract math go viral, Bryce had a reputation for sniffing out brilliance in unexpected places. He released a video titled, "This high schooler solved a problem professors ignored and got punished for it." In the 12-minute breakdown, Bryce walked his viewers through the equation with animations, voiceover, and dramatic pauses. He didn't just solve a challenge, Bryce explained. He reframed the approach. He collapsed layers of integration into a recursive feedback loop that, if expanded, could shift how we teach complex systems. And this kid? Expelled. By the end of the week, the video hit 1.3 million views. And that's when the tide began to turn. The mainstream media had ignored Amari's story when it was messy, when it was protest signs, and school statements, and racial tension. But now it was palatable. Now it had polish, animation, music, an influencer saying, "This matters." People started asking questions. Who was this student? Why haven't we heard about him? What kind of school expels genius? One morning, Amari woke up to find his name trending on Twitter. Not because of hate, but because of wonder. And then came the tweet that changed everything. It was posted by Dr. Nina Cole, a tenured physicist at Caltech, the first black woman to lead a research team for quantum fluid dynamics. She rarely tweeted, but this time she made an exception. "I just reviewed Amari Hale's proof. This kid didn't just solve a problem. He changed how we ask the question. This kid just changed calculus." A renowned black physicist tweets, "This kid just changed calculus." Amari Hale had once been a name whispered in hallways, dismissed behind locker doors, scoffed at in staff lounges. But now, the world was saying it, shouting it, without restraint. And not all of it with celebration. In the hours after Dr. Nina Cole's tweet, Amari's name trended on Twitter, Reddit, and even LinkedIn. Thousands of messages flooded the digital landscape. Some were celebratory, others curious, many confused. But it didn't take long before the internet did what it always did. It split the truth down the middle and let everyone decide which half to believe. He's brilliant. He's a fraud. This is what happens when you let affirmative action go too far. No way a teenager from North Carolina did this without help. It's a plant. His mentor ghostwrote the whole thing. It's deeper. This is a scheme to discredit traditional math education. The last comment was from a verified account. A tenured professor. White. Older. Concerned about the erosion of academic rigor. It was cloaked in professionalism but dripping with accusation. Amari didn't see most of it at first. His mother had changed the passwords to his old accounts. Ruben had warned him about the digital crossfire. But it was everywhere. In the air. In the pauses of every conversation. In the strange stares at gas stations and grocery stores. And then came the requests. Local news stations asked for interviews. YouTubers with flashy thumbnails reached out. Even right-wing pundits tried to bait him with offers for open dialogue on academic fairness. Amari said no to all of them. But silence couldn't shield him anymore. Not after Ed Proof Beats Power's video crossed 3 million views in 3 days. Not after The Verge published a feature titled, From Expelled to Exalted, How a Teen's Rejected Proof is Changing the Way We Teach Calculus. Amari's name had become bigger than Amari. It was now a symbol, one people could use for whatever story they wanted to tell. For some, he was a genius fighting institutional racism. For others, he was a poster boy for everything wrong with woke education. The hate crept in. Anonymous Reddit threads posted blurry childhood photos of him scraped from long-abandoned accounts. Users claimed to be former classmates describing him as arrogant, unstable, the kind of kid who thought he was smarter than everyone. Someone went as far as to fake an old disciplinary report, claiming Amari had been caught cheating in middle school. Completely fabricated, but viral enough to become fact in certain corners of the web. Even his mother wasn't spared. A right-wing blog accused her of being an activist nurse who manipulated the system to push her son through. They posted pictures of Simone outside her hospital from a Facebook post dated 3 years prior, edited with ominous filters to make her look threatening. Then came the theory that stuck like glue. Dr. Sykes ghostwrote the proof. It had started as a fringe idea, whispered in hateful comment sections. But then a prominent academic blog gave it traction. They didn't outright accuse, but they asked questions. Carefully curated one. Given Dr. Sykes' prior unpublished work, is it possible he revised his own failed proof using a student as a conduit? Could this be a redemption play masquerading as mentorship? How much influence is too much influence? Ruben saw the storm forming. He called Amari that night. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," Amari replied. "It's like they're trying to delete me all over again." But slower. Ruben's voice was steady. "They want you to crack. They want you to say one wrong thing so they can say, 'See, he never had it to begin with.' You stay quiet, they call it weakness. You speak, they call it arrogance." Amari was silent for a long time. Then, "So what do I do?" Ruben paused. "You show them what genius looks like when it refuses to shrink." The next day, an email came from PBS NewsHour. Not a panel. Not a debate. Just a whiteboard, a chair, and a single camera. "We don't want your pain," the producer wrote. "We want your mind." Amari said yes. The studio was minimalist. A college classroom with fluorescent lights. One wall painted white. A black marker. One lapel mic. No applause. No anchors. Just time and space. As the camera rolled, Amari stood in front of the board. He didn't start with the math. He started with the moment that changed everything. "My teacher gave us an impossible problem," he said. "Not because he thought someone could solve it, but because he believed I couldn't." Then he turned, picked up the marker, and wrote. Step by step he rebuilt the proof. He didn't oversimplify. He didn't show off. He walked through his logic like a mapmaker, patient and precise. He referenced Dr. Sykes' original structure, and how his own intuition found a recursive pattern that collapsed multiple dimensions of the function. "You can't fake rhythm," he said at one point. "You can memorize math. You can't feel it unless it lives inside you." It wasn't a speech, it was a composition. By the time he finished, the board was filled edge to edge. But more than that, there was a stillness in the room, the kind that comes when something bigger than proof is witnessed. It aired at 9 on the. By midnight it was trending globally. Teachers downloaded it for their classrooms. University deans shared it across faculty groups. Parents played it at kitchen tables with their children. One tweet read, "I don't understand half of what he said, but I felt all of it. That's what brilliance does." But of course, Not everyone celebrated. That same night, a YouTube debunker released a 40-minute video titled, How Woke Media Manufactured a Math Messiah. The video had dramatic music, exaggerated pauses, and cherry-picked comments. Its core argument, that Amari was being used as a pawn in a larger cultural agenda, that he couldn't have written the proof, that the real story wasn't about math, it was about victimhood. The comments under that video were brutal, racist, personal, but something had shifted. This time, the hate was met with something stronger. People fought back. Educators, researchers, everyday students began pushing back in real time, fact-checking claims, posting citations, sharing breakdowns of Amari's logic. The narrative wasn't one-sided anymore. That Friday afternoon, Amari sat in his room, the lights off, a half-eaten bowl of cereal by his desk. He stared at his inbox, hundreds of unread messages piling in. He clicked on one randomly. It was from a graduate student in India. I watched your proof and cried. Not because I understood every part, but because I saw someone who looked like me owning the board. Another one from a high school teacher in Detroit.
I showed your PBS segment to my entire class. For the first time, my black students believed math could belong to them.
Amari didn't cry, but he felt something loosen in his chest. A tightness he hadn't realized he was holding finally started to ease. And then came the email. No fanfare, no subject line in all caps, just clean, official formatting. From Admissions Azad, subject, follow-up, body. Mr. Hale, we had the privilege of reviewing your PBS segment and recent work. We understand that your initial application was paused due to circumstances beyond your control. We would like to invite you to MIT for an in-person discussion about your work and possible reinstatement into the 2025 Scholar Initiative. Please let us know your availability. Amari stared at the screen. He read it 3 times. Then he leaned back, exhaled, and whispered, They want to meet. And Amari read the email from MIT. He didn't trust it. Even after reading it 3 times, even after his mother pressed a hand to her mouth in stunned silence, and even after Ruben quietly whispered, I told you they'd come back around, Amari didn't move. He just stared at the screen, trying to process what felt like the impossible turning back to face him. They wanted to meet, not interrogate, not investigate. Meet, that word alone, felt revolutionary. 3 days later, he boarded his first flight. He wore a plain blue button-down shirt. No logos, no phrases. He didn't want to announce anything. He just wanted to breathe. The MIT campus in Cambridge welcomed him with a chill in the air, and a kind of quiet that didn't feel like silence. It felt like thought. Students walked with heads buried in textbooks, minds busy chasing answers. Amari had only recently begun to realize he belonged near. Ruben didn't come, but he called that morning. This isn't redemption, he said. It's recognition. Don't confuse the two. Amari didn't. They met him in a modest lecture hall. 2 professors from the Department of Mathematics, one from theoretical physics, and a graduate student who recognized Amari from the PBS segment. The room wasn't intimidating. There were no giant seals or power plays, just notebooks, tea mugs, and curiosity. One of the professors, Dr. Alan Viteri, began, We wanted to hear your process. Not the media's version. Not your mentor's summary. Just yours. Amari opened his notebook, took a breath, and started from the beginning, not just of the proof, but of his story. He spoke of Windcrest, of the equation on the board, of the humiliation that followed, of Ruben's mentorship, of the long nights revising, refining, and building a solution that no one had asked for but refused to ignore. He didn't cry. He didn't grandstand. He explained. The board became his instrument again, the marker and extension of his mind. An hour passed, then another. By the time he capped the pen and stepped back, the room was silent, not in doubt, but in awe. The theoretical physicist, a stern woman named Dr. Karen Azizi, finally broke the silence. Your recursive breakdown of integral behavior under compressed symmetry? She said. That's not just sound, that's elegant. Dr. Viteri nodded. We've had postdocs fumble through this concept. You just articulated a framework that could influence first-year curriculum models. Then came the sentence Amari never expected to hear again. We'd like to offer you full admission, Viteri said, sliding a folder across the table, along with a named scholarship. No restrictions, no probation, no asterisk. Amari's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Inside was a letter printed on embossed paper. his name at the top, his new beginning below it. He tried to speak, but he couldn't. Instead he sat, put his head in his hands, and cried, tears not of weakness, but of release, of knowing that the door he had once been pushed out of, branded a fraud, was now being held open by people who saw not just his potential, but his proof. Later that day, in a quiet cafe near Kendall Square, he called Ruben. They gave it to me, he whispered. I never doubted it, Ruben said, but I'm glad they finally caught up. They want more, Amari added. They want to know about you too, about the 1978 paper. There was a pause. Amari, Ruben said slowly, I spent most of my life pretending that moment didn't matter. Now I'm realizing it might have just waited for the right time to matter. They want us to co-author. Another pause. This time longer. When Ruben finally spoke, his voice cracked. Then I guess we better remind them who wrote the first line. Over the next few weeks, Amari and Ruben worked together daily, revising the proof again, merging their voices, refining their commentary. MIT offered resources, research assistance, and lab time. But the heart of it, the core logic, remained untouched, because it had never needed fixing. Back in North Carolina, the world around Windcrest had started to change too. The petition to investigate Windcrest's handling of Amari's expulsion had gained over 50,000 signatures. Alumni began pulling donations. Local parents staged protests outside the school, demanding answers. But inside the school's boardroom, Principal Travers remained silent. Mr. Calloway, however, did not. He still taught class, still smiled, still mentioned Amari, in veiled tones. Some students just aren't ready for the rigor, even if they're good at showing off. Until the day he received a letter. It came in a slim white envelope, no return address visible except a Boston postmark. He opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of an academic journal's acceptance notice, one of the most prestigious publications in modern mathematics. Amari's name was at the top, Ruben's beneath it. Their proof had been accepted. But attached to the letter was something else. A nomination form. Amari Hale and Dr. Ruben Sykes had been nominated for the National STEM Impact Award. The envelope didn't come with a note. It didn't need to. Because as Calloway stared at the form, reading and rereading the word nominee, his face tightened. He had called Amari a fraud. Now the nation was calling him a genius. Mr. Calloway receives a letter. Amari's paper is being nominated for a national award. The letter that arrived on Mr. Calloway's desk wasn't large or dramatic. It didn't come in a sealed envelope with gold trim or official embossment. It was plain, white, almost forgettable. But the name printed across the top burned like fire. Amari Hale, nominee, National STEM Impact Award. Below that, the name of Dr. Ruben Sykes, former academic ghost, now resurrected in public memory. Calloway read the letter once, then again, and a third time for good measure. With each reading, his jaw clenched tighter, his knuckles whitened against the paper's edge. He'd always believed himself to be a man of reason. He held tightly to procedure, to structure, to systems. But beneath that belief was a quiet obsession, with control, with gatekeeping, with making sure brilliance only looked a certain way. And Amari Hale was never part of that picture. Now he was on the cover. Calloway folded the letter. Slowly, methodically, he tucked it into his desk drawer and closed it like a confession. But the drawer wouldn't stay shut for long. The news of Amari's nomination exploded across educational and STEM circles. Within 48 hours, every major outlet that had once overlooked his story was scrambling to catch up. The New York Times called him a once misunderstood prodigy. Wired labeled his proof a recalibration of calculus itself. The Root ran a feature titled From Expelled to Exalted, the genius they tried to silence. But the article that did the most damage wasn't about Amari. It was about Windcrest. Published by an independent journalist and academic watchdog, the piece opened with a line that shattered the illusion of elite integrity. What if the real academic fraud wasn't Amari Hale but the institution that expelled him? That piece included emails, grading patterns, and interviews with anonymous former students. The math was undeniable. A 10-year analysis revealed that, in Mr. Calloway's AP Calculus course, black students were 4.2 times more likely to receive a grade lower than B, despite test scores on par with white peers. Recommendation letters were issued to 87% of white students who requested them. For black students, only over a dozen students reported being steered away from AP-level STEM courses, despite qualifying scores. The school administration, cornered, issued a statement that read more like damage control than admission. Windcrest Academy is committed to equity, excellence, and the integrity of academic evaluation. We are taking these concerns seriously and have opened an internal audit. But the students and parents weren't interested in quiet investigations anymore. They wanted accountability. It started with a protest. Dozens of students, past and present, stood outside the school's iron gates, holding signs that mirrored the language once used to vilify Amari. Define academic integrity. He wasn't cheating, you were grading. Gatekeeping, nail rigor. How many Amaris did we lose? Then came the parent coalition. They filed a formal demand for the resignation of Mr. Calloway, backed by over 1,500 signatures. Some were Windcrest parents, others were alumni. A few were retired faculty, who admitted, in hushed tones, that they'd looked the other way for too long. Anonymous letters surfaced from students dating back years. One girl recalled being told she was better suited for literature, after asking about joining robotics club. Another remembered Mr. Calloway mocking her for trying too hard when she stayed after class to understand a concept. Each story, once isolated, now formed a pattern too large to ignore. The school board convened emergency meetings. The head of the PTA resigned, citing a moral conflict. Donors began pulling funding. A foundation that had funded Windcrest's STEM lab withdrew its name. Inside the halls of Windcrest, the atmosphere changed. Mr. Calloway still showed up, tie perfectly knotted, shoes polished, but the students no longer feared him. Some glared, others ignored him entirely. He was still grading papers, but the authority behind his red ink had vanished, until the morning his email account was disabled. That afternoon, he was escorted out. The resignation letter was posted on the school's website in a single paragraph. Mr. William Calloway has chosen to resign, effective immediately. We thank him for his service and wish him well in future endeavors. There was no mention of the audit. No apology. No accountability. But everyone knew. The gatekeeper had fallen. Amari didn't celebrate when Simone read him the news over dinner. He barely looked up from his notes. They pushed him out, she said, watching her son's blank expression. I didn't want him gone, Amari replied. I wanted him to admit what he did. Reuben, who had stopped by that night, stirred his tea in silence. He never will, he finally said. Men like him don't confess. They just fade. Amari nodded, but said nothing more. Because for him the fire wasn't revenge. It was legacy. Then came the email from Windcrest. Not from Principal Trevors. She had quietly gone on medical leave. It was from the student council president, Mariam Reyes, a senior in Amari's old physics class. We're planning graduation. I know it's a long shot, but we're hoping you'll speak. Not for them, for us. For the ones who are still here. Amari read the message twice. His first instinct was to decline, to leave that place behind for good. To walk into MIT, and never look back. But something about Mariam's last sentence made him pause. We want to hear from someone who survived it. He showed Reuben. She's right, Reuben said. Survival isn't just about leaving. Sometimes it's about returning stronger than they ever imagined. So Amari said yes. He spent days drafting the speech. But no version felt right. He scribbled down lines about justice, about math, about erasure. But each time he read it back, it felt like a lecture, not a truth. It wasn't until he opened one of his old notebooks, the one with the original solution, that the words finally came. Not in anger, but in clarity. Graduation day arrived, sunny and sharp. Parents gathered on folding chairs under white tents. The Windcrest seal, now tarnished in public opinion, still hung from the stage's backdrop. There was a hush when Amari walked onto the stage. Some clapped, some sat stiffly, some just watched. He stepped up to the mic. I was supposed to sit among you today, he began, but I was told I didn't belong. He paused, letting the silence fill the air. I was told my mind was suspicious, that my work couldn't possibly be mine, that my excellence was a threat to their order. He scanned the crowd, and maybe it was. More silent. But what they never understood is that excellence doesn't come from privilege. It comes from persistence, from asking why, from refusing to stay in the boxes they build, to contain you. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded sheet. This, he said, is the proof I was expelled for. He unfolded it slowly. And this today is my return. The crowd rose.
Not all.
But enough. Amari is invited to speak at his former school's graduation ceremony, and delivers the truth they tried to silence. The applause started as a few scattered claps, cautious, careful, as if the crowd was testing whether it was allowed. Then it grew, like a rising wave. Rows of Windcrest students stood. Some parents too. Then faculty. Then alumni. The sound thundered across the school's pristine lawn, echoing off the tall brick walls that once muted Amari Hale's brilliance. Now those same walls were forced to listen. Amari didn't smile. He didn't soak it in like a victory lap. He simply stood still, holding the folded paper of his proof like a monument. The ovation wasn't for fame. It was for survival. When the noise settled and he stepped away from the podium, the gravity of it all sank in. He had returned not just as a student, but as a speaker. Not just as a name in disciplinary reports, but as a face on national stages. And though the administrators tried to manage the optics, placing his chair strategically, issuing carefully sanitized press releases, none of it could erase what had happened. The truth was written in every strained smile from faculty members who once doubted him, in the tight nod from the math department head who still hadn't said his name aloud. But most importantly, the truth was written in the eyes of the students. Black, brown, quiet, curious, who finally saw someone like them claim a microphone without apology. Amari had walked into this school 2 years ago, as a scholarship kid, with silence in his steps. Now he left it as a scholar whose voice couldn't be silenced. That night, the video of his graduation speech exploded across the internet. Clips flooded TikTok, stitched with commentary and tears. Instagram Reels added subtitles in multiple languages. STEM educators on YouTube uploaded reaction breakdowns. Hashtags like Amari Hale, Black Boy Brilliance, and Proof Not Privilege trended for hours. Even celebrities shared the moment. One actor tweeted, "The kid they tried to bury is now writing the future of science. Stay loud, Amari." But perhaps the most meaningful message didn't come from a fan or influencer. It came from Dr. Ruben Sykes, who watched the live stream from his apartment, tears silently rolling down his face. He sent a short message that night. "You honored me more than any award ever could. But make no mistake, your brilliance is your own." Amari read the message twice, then looked up at the ceiling. He whispered to no one in particular, "You saved me." A week later, Amari stood on the stage at the National Mathematics Symposium. He wasn't just a participant, he was the closing keynote. His topic was bold: proof, pattern, and the politics of potential. In it, he didn't just explain equations. He unpacked the systems that decide who is seen as gifted, who gets second chances, and who gets discarded. He spoke about Ruben, about being silenced, about the weight of always having to prove it twice. And then with one final stroke, he shared something unexpected. "My goal is not just to solve problems, it's to create frameworks so other minds don't get left behind." The room went still, then it roared. A month later, the journal that once buried Ruben Sykes' work, the Journal of Mathematical Frontiers, published a full retraction of their 1980 editorial that had discredited him. In its place was a new article, co-authored by Amari and Ruben, titled "Recursive Elegance, a Reconsideration of Theoretical Thresholds in Calculus Instruction." Ruben's name finally appeared in academic history, not as a footnote, but as a foundation. Amari made sure of it. The world celebrated, but not everyone clapped. At Windcrest, there were still murmurs. A few teachers spoke in faculty lounges about how the media took it too far. One parent wrote a complaint about politicizing math. A few donors withdrew pledges, claiming the school had succumbed to public pressure. Amari saw their faces during his speech. Arms crossed, eyes narrowed, mouths tight. But they didn't matter anymore. Because he wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking over them. And those who needed to hear it did. After the ceremony, as the sun dipped behind the auditorium, and students posed for photos in caps and gowns, Amari stepped behind the stage to catch his breath. His mother was waiting nearby, tears in her eyes. "You did it, baby." He nodded. "We did it." Then a figure approached from the side, a woman in a gray suit, holding a leather-bound portfolio and a badge that read, "NASA, Talent Acquisition." She extended her hand. "Mr. Hale, I'm Elise Daniels. I was asked to come meet you in person. We've been following your work." Amari blinked. "NASA?" She smiled. "Let's talk about your future. I think there's a place for you among the stars." Amari walks off stage and is met by a talent scout from NASA. The auditorium at Windcrest Academy was nearly empty when Amari returned, months after graduation. The centuries of polished floors, the echoing of his own footsteps. and the hush of dusty chairs reminded him that this place had once tried to silence him. Now it stood as the prologue to his journey, a symbol of how far he'd come. Amari had agreed to one final visit, not as a student, but as a messenger. The auditorium would be filled that day with black youth, invited to a live-streamed kickoff, a new online platform he'd created, Proof Beyond Limits, dedicated to teaching advanced math through storytelling. His goal to empower black children who had been told their minds didn't belong in these rooms. Backstage, Amari felt a ripple in his chest, like a chord struck in the dark. He looked out at the empty chairs, imagining them filled with curious eyes, bright minds itching to believe they belonged. He thought of the original equation, scrawled on a whiteboard 2 years ago, and how a simple act of curiosity had sparked a blaze. He breathed in, adjusted his jacket, and stepped out under the light. Over the next hour, Amari taught as though lit from within. He wasn't just explaining calculus, he was unraveling fear. His camera captured him in frames, small and large. A black teen flipping integrals on screen. His voice steady, clear, demanding attention not through aggression but through brilliance. He referenced Reuben Sykes at every turn, telling stories not to evoke pity, but to show context. This man changed mathematics, he said, even when the world tried to bury him. He explained the heart of the original proof, framed his vision of math as liberation, not exclusion. Comments poured in, hundreds of young viewers from across the country typing, "Thank you." At the end of the live stream, he paused. The stage lights felt softer, warmer, urgent. "Remember," he said, voice low, "sometimes the wrong equation solves the right problem." In the following weeks, Amari traveled, visiting inner-city schools, underfunded districts, community centers, and rural high schools. He carried nothing more than a laptop, a portable whiteboard, and a story that glowed in his chest, the story of that wrong equation. Students who had never seen someone who looked like them speak like this came forward. One ninth grader, Zora, had tears in her eyes after Amari simplified the fundamental theorem of calculus using a real-life rhythm analogy. Another student, Malachi, told him quietly, "I thought math was for other people. Now I want to be an analyst." Teachers invited Amari back. Some even asked Reuben to co-teach online seminars with him. The narrative was shifting. Potential wasn't tethered to zip codes or GPA thresholds. It was boundless when given room to breathe. Meanwhile, back in Boston, Reuben's health began to slip. He still showed up to every online session, his voice cracked but firm, his eyes brighter than ever when talking math. One afternoon, Amari received a call from Reuben's caregiver. "Dr. Sykes, he's asking for you." Amari flew from Boston to Durham the next day. Reuben's house, once a place of sanctuary, was now filled with quiet breathing machines and sunlight that slipped through threadbare curtains. Reuben lay in bed, frail, but his mind shone clear. "I'm proud of you," Reuben whispered. His lips trembled. "You didn't just solve equations, you solved history." Amari held his hand. "No one ever told me I could be more than they expected." Reuben exhaled, then closed his eyes. When Amari looked down again, Reuben had slipped peacefully away. The silence in the room was vast, filled with the gravity of one life's passing, and the bright torch now in Amari's hand. Back in his studio apartment in Cambridge, Amari framed the original whiteboard equation, the one Calloway wrote as a trap. He sketched it carefully on archival grade paper, beneath a headline he had commissioned in bold type. They called him a fraud. Below it he inscribed the full proof his work that had followed. He placed it on the wall behind his new teaching desk, where every livestream viewer could see both the lie and the truth coexisting in one frame. That evening, Amari lit a candle beside the frame. He spoke aloud, even though no one else was in the room. "They tried to erase me, but I'm part of something bigger now. It wasn't me alone. It was every mind they told to be silent." He allowed the tears to come. Tears not of sorrow, but of meaning. Months later, Proof Beyond Limits rolled out a scholarship fund for Black students in STEM. Supported by grants from MIT, philanthropic organizations, and NASA, students nationwide applied, their essays dotted with phrases like, "I want to prove what brilliance looks like," and "I don't want to be invisible anymore." Amari selected the finalist personally. He read every word in their essays, seeing their hunger, their resilience, their quiet brilliance. On a sunny Saturday in summer, he convened a virtual awards ceremony. Each recipient received a scholarship, mentorship sessions, and the chance to co-share live stream sessions with Amari himself. Zora's face appeared on screen. She looked into the camera shyly and said, Amari, if you did it, maybe I can too. The words landed like a final chord in a symphony, soft yet electric. Sometimes the wrong equation solves the right problem. When the world tells you your brilliance is dangerous, carry it anyway. When the structures try to contain your mind, refuse to be contained. This light you carry can scatter shadows. And one day someone will whisper, if he did it, maybe I can too. A student in the crowd whispers, if he did it, maybe I can too. No child should have to fight this hard just to be seen. No mind should be silenced because of the skin it lives in. If Amari's story moved you, if it made you angry, made you hope, type yes. If you believe in justice, subscribe if this broke your heart. Let the world know we're watching.